You were helping the other departments tell their story externally. Is that an accurate?
Yeah, because I was sitting in a corporate role, and so it was a really interesting experience in that respect because the first time you call up, like, the jet engine factory or the gas turbine factory, and you're like, "Hey, we'd love to bring a drone camera through your factory floor if you wouldn't mind, because you have a great story to tell." They're like, "Yeah, we gotta get some, like, engines off the lot."
Who is
So
this? Welcome back to the Media Odyssey podcast. My name is Evan Shapiro, and this week there is no Marianne Ranchette. She is on vacation, as folks from Europe do now and then. So I'm hosting solo. But rather than host solo, I wanted to talk about something that's super important to me, which is career sustainability, career development. Right now is a really hard time in the media universe. Last couple of years, we've shed more jobs in media and entertainment and tech than the 5 years prior to that combined. And so, whether you're thinking about changing your careers or you're starting your career after graduating college into a really interesting economy, or you need to change your careers because you lost your job or laid off or you quit, I want to talk about two ends of the career spectrum here, the earliest and then the middle. So, maybe not the ends, but the beginning and the middle. And we've got two great guests, Jazz Pitcairn and Katrina Craigwell, with us to talk about two different stages of careers and how important it is to maintain a network, to always be open to new opportunities, and to continue to have enthusiasm and a curiosity for the things you do in your life. Let's start with Katrina Craigwell. We've known each other for how long?
like, almost 20 years.
20 years. Your current title is what?
I am MD, head of product for Chase's, consumer branded credit cards. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's a great job.
And when we first met, you were doing what?
I think I started as a marketing intern and then became a PR coordinator, at the Independent Film Channel,
At the IFC, as we used to
the
call it.
IFC.
So you look through the perspective of your career from PR intern or marketing intern at a television network, and now heading a whole department of customer relations and marketing at Chase. At the client.
Yeah.
Really,
Well,
in a very go
and
ahead.
I'm actually doing product. I've moved away from marketing, which will always be my first love, but I'm now doing technical product and program management for the platforms that power a good chunk of Chase's credit cards. So I keep thinking it's a long way from home.
It couldn't be more different than the first thing you did when you entered whatever industry it is that we kind of share. And so I thought looking back at that trajectory and figuring out how you got from there to here could be a good lesson in, really thinking outside of the box about yourself and about pivoting when you think you need to, when you need to, before you need to. You worked at AMC, you worked in marketing there for a little while, and then you went to GE. Is that right?
I did. I actually had a couple of gigs in between the time at IFC and GE. I worked for a group of startups for about 6 months. I've been let go from my job 3 times in my career. That's something I used to talk about. One
Really?
was from the retail floor at Lululemon during college. The second was from this group of I still love Lululemon, swear by it. This group of startups, which was a really important lesson. I think, about 25 at the time. And it actually might have been like right around my 25th birthday. But I had kind of jumped in and taken a job that wasn't really well defined. And I was still very young in my career. And what I didn't do a good job of was being clear about what am I bringing to this company and how am I like defining that and articulating that and agreeing on that with my stakeholders and then driving that. I was kind of flying a little bit by the seat of my pants. And so that was a really important lesson. And then I went to work at a social media agency, Attention, and and I think the team at IFC actually helped me get there, find my way there. And what I love about agency experience, it's similar with consulting experience, is you get to learn a lot. You get to see different industries and you get to be executing. And executing and making sure that the work that you're doing is getting to the customer is one of the principles throughout my career that has been really, really important to me. And then after that, I went to GE. And I've always been a bit of a nerd, and I've always loved big machines and, sci-fi and all that kind of stuff, and I've always loved storytelling. And at the time, GE, which is much different now, it is broken into 3 companies, but it was a big conglomerate that did a lot of things that, if you'd flown on a plane, if you'd charged your phone, if you'd gone through a hospital, you had very likely been on the other end of a GE machine. And so it was kind of this invisible layer of beautiful technology that people didn't really understand. And so for me, there was so much to learn. It was like a playground and an opportunity to kind of continue with storytelling. And so we launched GE on Instagram and got GE into virtual reality and YouTube and working with creators and all these things that actually, um, connected back to a start in television in a really nice way. And so spent 7 years there, and throughout my roles there, I always looked at like, well, okay, what's the next adjacent area of capability that I can learn? How do I bring what I'm really good at, trade it, and then learn something I don't know anything about? And so I spent 5 years at GE Corporate doing brand storytelling, and then I moved over to GE Digital for 2 years where I ran that was kind of my first team of a meaningful size, where I ran brand and eventually demand generation. And GE Digital was focused on selling software that would work across these big machines, across wind turbines, across jet engines, et cetera. And then I had to start to learn things like demand gen and really connect marketing to commercial impact.
So there's a
So that was
huge, transformation of your career and ergo your kind of entire worldview, I would say, over the course of this time. I think it starts with the idea of discovering your transferable talents. You
yeah.
talked about figuring out the stuff that would always be true. I think I love the idea of immersing yourself in a portfolio and environment at an agency. I think the difference between working at a brand or at a company and working at an agency that works for companies is a real difference in perspective that a lot of people don't understand is additive. First of all, the networking opportunity at working at an agency, is that how you met the folks that eventually brought you to GE?
It actually is. It's always like a relationship here, a relationship there. And so
Right,
it was
and the
someone from the
ability to
agency.
have that kind of portfolio network versus a singular kind of vertically integrated network at one company really does offer a different perspective. Not one is better than the other, but having both in your careers is very, very useful, over the course of time, and then you made this huge leap. At GE, were you internally faced for storytelling at first, or was it an external, operation?
It was always external storytelling.
Okay, so
So speaking to
you
the
were
public.
helping the other departments tell their story externally, is that an accurate?
Yeah, yeah, because I was sitting in a corporate role, and so it was a really interesting experience in that respect because the first time you call up, like, the jet engine factory or the gas turbine factory, and you're like, "Hey, we'd love to bring a drone camera through your factory floor if you wouldn't mind, because you have a great story to tell." They're like, "Yeah, we gotta get some, like, engines
Right.
off the lot,
Who is
so
this? What are
who
they
is this?"
smoking? Well,
That's
but I
right,
think
and
that's
so
yeah,
yeah.
but that's super interesting. So here you are working in marketing, and this is something I've talked about a lot in the stuff that I've written is which is if you're in marketing, you're in media, you can apply those skills on engines, on kind of abstract concepts, but you have to understand the relationship and you have to kind of divorce yourself from the practical limitations in front of you and really look at it as, to your point, storytelling in this case, or marketing, generally speaking, and market fit, and the more kind of zoomed out versions of what you're doing, as opposed to forgetting for a second that they're jet engines that you're working on. And then, go about the science of it. And so that first conversation, starting to work on jet engines and creating demand generation, right? For a wide array of kooky products at GE really taught you what? What did it teach you?
Well, they first like, at its core, there are a couple things. A lot of the work, the soul of the work and the spirit of the work was if you spend a minute understanding how any one of these machines work, if you spend a minute with the humans who are building these machines that are like, I mean, when you think of like, these are incredible things, there's like a spark there, right? There's some magic there if you're at all curious about the world around you. And so it was feeling that spark and figuring out how to bring it to people in a way where we could share that. And that was like, that's a core principle that you can take to anything. There is a story anywhere at the core of so much of what is around us is a human with a vision, maybe a little help from AI these days, but who has brought something, right, that's close to their heart to market to serve somebody. And so
And
that
that
is one
that
of the
becomes a universal but that becomes
it
a
is universal.
universal tenet of your work, right? No
Yes.
matter
Yes.
around then, kind of emerging through all these varied stories that you need to tell, these varied practices that you have to jump in and out of on an ongoing basis. Internally at a company at GE, you brought this kind of, I don't know, meeting the bridge on the more than halfway, the empathetic understanding of the world around you, but this also general curiosity of what makes a consumer and a product match, right? That you now apply to products. So you're doing this across an array of internal clients for external audiences at GE, and then you make a leap. First of all, how do you make a leap from GE to JP Morgan? How do you go from GE to banking? I mean,
So
theoretically, I guess it's not that huge a chasm, but it does feel like different worlds.
they are different worlds. Again, it was a relationship. So it was my network, being incredibly supportive. And there was the first time I went to Chase, I went to run marketing for a product called Fin, which was an experimental mobile only deposit product. And it was a small team running end to end marketing, but another new type of opportunity. Then I ran employer brand marketing for a year. Then I went to Meta for a few years. And then I came back to
You
Chase
left
into the role.
Chase and you went to Meta. And
Yeah.
again, is this all comes from you're not applying for open jobs or are headhunters seeking you out, or is it this is almost entirely driven through this network of humans you've woven together over time?
It's almost entirely driven through the network of humans. It's interesting, the Meta role, a recruiter reached out, and that was probably the only example where it wasn't like a personal relationship that brought me in, which I just think back, I'm like, That's interesting," as one point of difference, but yes, the rest is all personal relationships, and there are incredible leaders at all these companies, so, if you're not spending time getting to know the leaders at the company that you're at, that's just such an important part of the experience, and it's been a gift to me throughout my.
Internal marketing at the companies you go to.
Yeah, and so they can be marketing leaders, they can be leaders that are in, functions that you're interested in, that are adjacent, because you always have something to bring, right? There's always if you have knowledge and spark and passion and curiosity, like, curiosity is the key, there's always a way to sit down with somebody for 30 minutes and
Well, and it's
share what
kind of
you
like
know.
it's a market
Yeah,
at that point.
yeah,
You're exchanging your enthusiasm and value add for theirs.
yeah.
And that's how we agree to cooperate with each other as members of this huge community. But how did you create a community that has that kind of varied a source of folks. You know, you have banking, you have GE, you have Meta, and now you do. But how do you take care? How do you caretake that network? You seem to have a more vibrant and active and organic nurturing of your network than a lot of people I know. What is your secret, or how do you approach this?
A couple things, do what you say you're gonna do,
Mm.
show up prepared and with enthusiasm, um, deliver, and also share your wins. Go back, right, to the people who've supported you. It doesn't matter if they supported you last year, 5 years or 10 years ago. Let them know how you're doing. Let them know what's great. Let them know how what they taught you or inspired in you is still serving what you're able to do today. And I think that's a really that's and it's meaningful to me to be able to do that and to say, hey, we haven't talked in a couple of years, but I just want to let you know what I'm doing today. And I'm so proud of it. And I couldn't have done it without you. And I'm still doing things that I couldn't have done without you. And I think that's a lot of the kind of heart and soul of these relationships. So, use their time wisely, be prepared, deliver, and share the wins.
And that's the kind of nature of our relationship. You do a check. You're much better at this than I am. You do a check in every so often. We get together. We have breakfast. We do. We compare notes. And then, frankly, something I don't think you just gave yourself credit for, which you do, which is you then add value back. So you're not just checking in and saying, "Hey, here's my progress. Thank you so much for your support over the time, but how can I now help you? I went on your podcast. You're now coming on mine." But also just, frankly, in the sharing of this story, in watching you, traverse these interesting hoops over the years, it's just been fascinating as someone who studies this type of stuff to watch someone progress the way that you have, not in a linear fashion, but really, truly, it seems like not just organic, but also purposeful. You have an intent, even though you're not necessarily planning every step all along the way, because you couldn't if you tried, really.
You couldn't, and for me, it's like stay open because I my goal is to be a lifelong learner. So you never know where you're gonna get the opportunity to learn next, right? And I just hope I continue to get invited on the ride. I think one of the other principles that I have kind of learned throughout my career is I want the opportunity to go to the core of a problem. And that's part of why I think tried to learn different disciplines and adjacent disciplines and feel really grateful right now to be in product management
Yeah, so
um, as well.
you made this leap from consumer or from marketing and messaging and storytelling. Now your storytelling is at the heart of the product itself. You're helping to build products at Chase that affect millions of people's finances and lives. And what made you move from messaging to product? What compels someone to make that big a leap? That's huge.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. First of all, again, Chase is yet another place with incredible leaders to learn from, and so like you choose the people, you choose the problem to solve. Um, what I love about product, first, there are similarities across both product and marketing. You have to know your audience, you have to understand what they want, you have to ship work, ship features, ship things, get the feedback back. And sometimes I say, well, there are certainly many differences. Sometimes I say that when I was doing marketing and storytelling, I was working with filmmakers and photographers and editors. And now I work with solution architects and engineers and UX and UI designers. And so but we all have to kind of put an experience together that is going to light a customer up. And then it was just like, picking probably one of the steepest learning curves I could find and seeing if I could make it. And that's always fun, provided that you do. But that's kind of what I love about it. And the last thing I'll say is I as I build my career, I always want the opportunity to go to the core of a problem. So sometimes you get like a marketing um, uh, you know, project or program, and you're like, okay, I could tell the story about this, but if I could fix this little thing about the thing that I'm marketing, or you're building a product and it's amazing, you're ready to go to market, and you want to be the one to tell that story. And so I love connecting those puzzle pieces over time and being able to kind of fix the core of a thing or work on the core of a problem first or opportunity, and then build out the concentric rings from there of how to go to market. And that's something that I'll continue on my career. um, Product probably won't be my last stop in terms of new function.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're making a podcast now. Tell me about that real quickly.
Yeah, so the podcast is called Am I on Mute? And I started it with my co-host Annalise Campbell. We started publishing episodes in
She's an expert
2023.
in social media marketing, correct?
She is. And so I had a big kind of corporate background, and she started on the agency side and then started her own company called CFG. And so she had the entrepreneurial background. And the first season was really about work culture in a hybrid world, because that's like we were immersed in that. And we had just done a panel about it. And like everyone had a question in the room that we were in, and every question was different. And we got off stage, and like a true storyteller, content creator, I was like 6 episodes just came out of that panel, so maybe we should, try this out. And also, it was just a joy to do. And so one of the things that I also say is, whatever kind of side project you can carve out the time for so that you can create on your own schedule, you can feel the feeling of making the edit on the episode, the social post, hitting publish, having to respond to that feedback, and just like keep that muscle going is a great opportunity. And so every episode we talk to a guest. We're on season 3 right now. We just spoke to you, which was wonderful, and we're actually focused on left turns in your career. So people who've had amazing first chapters in their careers and then just done something completely different in a second chapter, and it's been a real joy to do.
Yeah, and that's kind of what sparked me to ask you on for this episode in particular. Marion, my co-host, is out, but I wanted to do an episode on career pivots and your ability to stay curious and engaged and enthusiastic at every stage. I mean, I mean this in the kindest possible way. You're not as young as when we met. I am.
No, I'm not.
I'm the same exact age as when we met. But
Whatever you're
you
drinking, I'll take it.
Okay. But you're as still as energetic and enthusiastic about the curiosity of what the fuck you do on a daily basis, which is I think one of the key drivers that have moved you from marketing intern to PR to rocket science, literal rocket science, right? To banking to product, but also to this side hustle like you talked about, this endeavor that is kind of purely theoretical and artistic and creative for you. And it can be different for anybody, right? It can be different. It can be a podcast. It could be knitting. It can be cooking. It can be your Instagram feed, whatever it is that keeps you engaged and learning and challenged, right?
Absolutely. It's whatever you want to do. But never stop learning. Never stop learning. And also don't forget what you're good at. And Evan, I think you spoke about this on the podcast with us, which is as you go on this journey, remember what you're good at and who you are and stay anchored in that. Because it's also easy to start pivoting and pivot away and get a little bit
Right.
go a little too far
You
afield.
try
And so I think that's
everything just for the sake of it.
try
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I mean, in your case, though, there was that crucial moment. I think there's a really good case study here, which is why I'm glad you came on. You had that critical moment of discovering what those transferable superpowers were that were going to come with you wherever you want. One of them being your curiosity, I believe. But this striving to learn something new, this caretaking of your network, this ability to be open to new things on an ongoing basis. These have been, basic elements of your career all along the way, and they've served you incredibly well.
they have.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Katrina Craigwell. We'll put the link to your LinkedIn bio in the show notes. Thanks so much for coming by. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I've known Jazz Pitcairn for a long time. She started as a student in my NYU class, and she's got a really interesting way of driving her career. And she's also doing some really cool stuff right now. How long have I known you? How long have we known each other, Jazz?
I'm gonna say 6 years.
6 years. Okay. And we first met how?
You were one of my great professors at NYU.
And you're a filmmaker by trade. You were first nominated for best filmmaker at 17 years old in the Cayman Islands, which is where you're from. Yeah.
Yes, I was. Sorry, excuse my voice. I'm losing it a little
You have
bit.
a cold like everybody else in the world. Um, and you came to NYU from the Cayman Islands to study film. What was that like?
I mean, it was a huge shift. I'm from a very small island, a small community where there is no existing film industry. There isn't really that many examples of people pursuing film, but I knew it was something I was interested in. And I think something I learned pretty early on, kind of to what I think is a practice that you preach, is you kind of have to own the path that you want to take and not follow in the footsteps necessarily of other people, because working in film is such an individual pathway, as collaborative as it can be in practice. So I knew NYU was one of the best film schools. I knew that I didn't have any existing connections to the film industry, and so why not shoot my shot and go to NYU?
And I mean, you're not a nepo baby by any stretch of the
No.
imagination, which our industry is full of. Like that must have been very exciting, but also really terrifying to a certain extent, coming to New York City from such a tiny place.
Yeah, I didn't know anybody in New York. I have a few extended family members, who I knew were around just in case, but beyond that, I didn't know anyone. But I figure it's no different than going to any college or any school. You're the new kid, everyone's kind of new, everyone's figuring it out. It's fine.
And then you came here, you really jumped into the program with both feet. You stood out in my class because you made an effort. You reached out to me. All my students need to do office hours with me, but you went above and beyond. And then you were the first person to convince me to go on TikTok. So the world has you to blame for that. And then we worked together over the years, but you went on your own And I know you've had help, from and advice and things like that, and and mentors and people who recommend you, but pretty much as a self-driven person, again, non-nepo baby from another country, you got yourself a series of great jobs in the industry at A24, Apple TV Plus, and then you became the first Canadian, is that how I say it?
Canadian, yeah.
Canadian to write for an American television network show, the Black Lady sketch show. How did you even get that gig? How did that even come about?
I think something I learned very early on was we're all qualified to do the same thing. I think once I started putting away that sort of imposter syndrome and started realizing like I'm a capable person and everyone gets where they get because of who they know, I was very diligent about networking within my school. That was the network that I had. I stayed in touch with professors, I stayed in touch with guest speakers, I reached out, I let people knew I existed so that by the time I got to graduating, I had a group of people who supported me and wanted to, at the very least, put me in a group of people they would then recommend. So after I completed my degree, I was an assistant on Dickinson, which is an Apple show. I got that job
How did you get
through,
that job? Yeah, how did you get that
yeah,
job?
it was through recommendation of a professor. He put up, I think, 10 different students and was like, hey, they're looking for an assistant. I happened to be the first person to email back. I was on a call with the line producer that night. I was talking to the director the next day, and I started on Monday. I think the turnaround time was like 3 or 4 days. Meanwhile, I remember getting the job on this Monday, now being in the assistant email and seeing people who I recognize sending their resume in that day because they figured they had the weekend to update their resume and send it in, which isn't a crazy thought, but it just goes to show how quickly things move. And that was my first like acknowledgement of like, yeah, I'm doing the right thing by being really diligent. And I see something come on my phone, I do it then and there. So I worked on Dickinson for about 4 months in the pre-production and production stage. I remained great friends with that director. I continued to assist him privately. And then another person who was a guest speaker in a previous class of mine, who I update my network. Hey, I'm doing this job. I'm an assistant. She happened to work for a production company that was making a Black Lady sketch show, and so she was aware of the opportunities there and reached out to me and said, hey, we're looking for a writer's assistant. Is this something you'd be interested in? Happy to at least put your name in the ring. So that's how the writer's assistant job for that came about. Now I'm in a writer's room. It's a, you know, now I know that to be a writer on a show, it's who you know times 100. And a lot of the times they like to promote the writer's assistants if possible. And so I was in a position where I knew the showrunner personally, I knew the show very well, so that when the following year came around to submit to be a writer, I had the advantage. I knew exactly the type of sketches to write, I knew what they would look for, and I had the personal relationship.
Well, so let's double click on a couple of those things. First, you went out and you were actively engaged with your professors, especially those, and I don't mean to say this in a Machiavellian sort of way, but especially those that could help you in your career. So those who that
Sure. But
were
I
great
will say,
professors, but also that also had a really good network of their own. Go
I
ahead.
was I was just gonna say that I will say though that I didn't know which professors would be helpful or not. And actually it was the professors who I took business of entertainment classes in who don't have the titles of like working in film, working with TV shows that ended up being the most, quote unquote helpful thus far in me getting jobs.
Not the ones on the creative end, but the
Yeah,
ones
they
on
weren't people that had the huge credits on IMDb. They were just people who I connected with and enjoyed being in their class. I didn't know that this professor who is in marketing happened to be great friends with this line producer on this Apple show. I had no idea.
so you went out and you networked with your professors. You made personal contacts. You really took advantage of the situation that you put yourself in by going to NYU. Then you diversified the inputs by going into the
Mhm,
business school and taking a lot of classes there. You got a minor in the
mhm,
BEMT, right? Which is the business of entertainment, media, and technology, and then wound up finding by accident that there was a really good resource there. Then you were the first one to answer that email. That I think is really crucially a nice moment to recognize that, being diligent, being the first to the office and the last to leave, that shit does still fucking matter. It impresses the right people in the right way, and it puts you, the early bird gets the worm is a cliche for a reason. So you get the job on the Black Lady sketch show.
yeah. And so that was an experience on its own. It was incredible. I mean, I was 23 at the time, so I was
23.
super young. I didn't even know how big of a deal it was, to be honest. I just, I was an assistant for 6 months. I was also in the process of trying to get a visa. I'm an international, I was an international student. I'm currently an immigrant. And so that whole process, I was just so determined, like, I have to keep working. I have to keep proving that I deserve to be here to qualify for these visas and stuff. So once I get the writing job, that was the biggest, like, okay, it's an HBO show, it's an Emmy-winning show, I'm around all these awesome people, what next? Because now I'm a quote unquote writer, I'm in the WGA. Theoretically, I should have jobs lined up waiting for me to
Not
keep
how it
hopping
works.
around to shows. I had a representation at the time. They were very optimistic. This is great. You're off the show super hot. You're gonna get put in stuff, and I'm like, cool. I'm gonna let my reps do their stuff, and while I wait to get magically put in a room, I'm gonna pivot to what it is I really want to do, which is direct my first feature film. And so I had graduated during COVID, so I didn't leave NYU with anything. I had no direct examples, no nothing. So I took the time to go back to Cayman. I spent 6 months there and I raised $60,000 to make a short film as a proof of concept for this feature because I knew I needed some sort of directing calling card. It was a lot of work because, like I mentioned earlier, Cayman doesn't really have a film industry. So I'm also actively teaching people how to be a gaffer, how to do this, how to do that. How am I raising money? Getting the
Yeah,
local
you're
airline to
raising
give us.
money. How did you raise the money? On
I
some
mean, it was
on,
yeah, it was
Kickstarter or just
it
friends
was
and
a
family?
mix. I mean, the Cayman version is I asked the government to give me a grant. I asked my mom to WhatsApp people we knew were wealthy and like bring the money privately, and then I had another friend who had money that said they would
And then you're
support.
building a film industry, if by by hand
Yeah.
there as
Which is
well.
which is also something I'm very passionate about. So it's like I'm making this film also about a subject that matters so much to people in Cayman. So from all these different angles, I knew I was well, I didn't really know, but now I know I was, not only creating job opportunities, but I was doing something people were passionate about, being an inspiration to things that people might want to do. And now I'm, in the process of really trying to get the feature off the ground.
So you made the short, you raised the money. The short's called Ivan,
Yeah,
about the hurricane and the effect and the aftermath there in Cayman. And it's a beautiful piece. But then you pivoted again. So the magical placing in rooms didn't happen from your reps because
right,
the industry is on fire and there aren't a lot of writing
right,
jobs right now.
right.
So you pivoted again, and you reached out to me a little while ago and we talked about it. But so talk about what you're doing now and why.
Yeah, so I think in this whole process, I'm still so passionate about becoming a filmmaker officially, whatever that means, and that making my first feature and continuing to work as a director. But I think in this process, I've also learned that I'm incredibly passionate about global affairs, generally speaking. Like I want to, like I work with the government often to create, you know, talk conversations between different Caribbean people. I think so much of storytelling affects the socio-political environment that we're in today. I've spoken at different climate conferences around the Caribbean, like through this film. And so as I continue to pursue making this feature film, I also was like, I've been so in love with political science and international relations. I want to actually have an educational foundation on that so I can speak well and eloquently to that and see, I'm the type of person who thinks 10 years from now, my job's going to be something that doesn't exist today. So,
Nice.
what can I do today in the time that I have to best prepare myself for that? So Cambridge University has a international part-time international relations program that allows me to travel back and forth. I don't have to pick up my life and press pause on the things that I'm doing to go, and it will allow me over 2 years to get a master's in international relations. And Evan so kindly wrote a letter of recommendation, and I found out recently that I was accepted, and so that was a huge thing because obviously, I mean, I studied film, so I had to prove in my application that I was still smart and could do academia and want to pursue it, and very excited to parallel path and both study international relations and still shoot my future
Yeah,
next year.
and so inside there, there's a number of things I want to unpack very quickly, which is, you're not independently wealthy. You have to work while you're doing all this. You had to work on television shows while you were figuring out your visa so that you could stay in the country, and you had to keep the jobs in order to get the visa, and then you had to go back to Cayman and come back and make that all work. So you've been parallel pathing all that stuff
Yeah.
all that time, and now you're going to continue to pursue making this feature, but you're going to this Cambridge program simultaneously while you're continuing to work as a writer and as an artisan in the industry itself. And so this kind of like walking and chewing gum it comes naturally to you, even though these are very complicated things that I think just figuring out this master's program exists. Many of us don't even understand, a lot of how this higher education programming works. This is something that fits right into your life. It's amazing. I didn't even
Yeah.
realize you could go back and forth. So the idea that I'm planning for a job 10 years from now that doesn't exist now, it's just brilliant, and it's something that I want other people who strive to pivot in their careers. You're still in the early stages of yours, but so many people I teach at university and so many people in early career that I meet don't necessarily understand how much work it is to be this competitive, to be this smart about the sustainability of your career.
It's a lot, and I'm still figuring it out. I'm the queen of saying, "I don't know what I don't know, but I know what I'm good at." I know, like, I love teaching, I love public speaking, I love learning new people and new different cultures, so what are different ways I can combine those things that I enjoy into something else? So we'll see what happens, I have no idea.
Well, I want to put a link to your site in the show notes, but also a link to Ivan, the film, so everybody can see it. Thanks,
Mm.
Jazz, for being here and offering your lessons on staying out there. And anybody out there who is a student now or is just graduating into what is an interesting economy, there's a lot of lessons to be learned by Jazz. Check out her site. But also, she's incredibly generous with her time. So if you reach out to her, I'm sure she'll offer some advice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks to Katrina and to Jazz for coming on the pod. Thanks for Marianne for giving me the keys to the podcast this week. My name is Evan Shapiro. My newsletter is Media War and Peace. You can check it out wherever you get your newsletters. Marianne's newsletter is Streaming Made Easy, also on Substack. And you can get information about Jazz and Katrina, Jazz's film, Katrina's podcast, in the links in the show notes. Thanks so much.